What language is your history written in? For my Welsh ancestors, for hundreds of years now, social and political life has been lived in two languages, Welsh and English. The situations in which each language has been used and by whom has shifted and changed over the years, but the impact of the English language on Welsh history is undeniable. But the question is, do you need to know Welsh to study Welsh history and find your ancestors? Well, the answer is complicated, and it requires us to look a bit at the political history of Wales and the history of the language. And at the end of the video, I'm going to show you that even knowing a few basic vocabulary can absolutely transform your ability to interpret Welsh history and find your ancestors. And I think that this serves as a good model for doing research in any language that you're not familiar with. So even if you're not doing Welsh research, there's a place for you here too. Welcome to Genial Cymru. My name is Di Davis, and in the comments, let me know if you've ever had any experiences of doing research in a foreign language. The number one rule of engaging with Welsh history is don't be afraid of the Welsh language. When many English speakers encounter the Welsh language for the first time, it can be particularly intimidating. Really, encountering any new language can be confusing, especially when you've never learned a second language as an adult. But there's also this specific fear that people have when it comes to Welsh that is rooted in its history as a marginalized language. And even today, there's a lot of misinformation out there about Welsh, which brands it as incredibly complicated, impenetrable to non-speakers, and fundamentally illogical. From its spelling to pronunciation to grammar, Welsh is impossible, or so they say. Have you ever seen someone joke about how Welsh has no vowels? I've seen that quite a few times, and it's just such a strange joke to me, because Welsh actually has more vowels than English does. And that's just part of the base level of misinformation that I'm sure most people have encountered. But despite this reputation in the English-speaking world, the Welsh language is just as complex and complicated as any language is. And the fact is, refusing to engage seriously with the language will prevent you from being successful in your research. That's just the reality of it. With that being said, record keeping in Wales has been, to some extent, bilingual since medieval times because of the country's relationship with England. Wales was formally annexed by the English crown in 1284, and in 1536, the Laws in Wales Act began the process of implementing English law across the country. As part of this unequal relationship, in Wales, English was declared the only legal language of the courts, and Welsh speakers were barred from holding public office unless they spoke and exclusively used English. As part of that, record keeping by the state and other official bodies, like the Church of England, was officially done in English. So what are the records that you can find that are in the English language? Well, the ones that you can find easily online include the census, at least between 1841 and 1901, parish records, including baptisms, marriages, and burials, civil registration, including birth, marriage, and death records, marriage licenses, and wills. These were all written in English, and these are also the core records you would want to look through if you were researching your family history. While English was the language of official record-keeping for much of history, it was not necessarily the language of everyday life. For most of Wales, up until very recently, that was Welsh. The first time a large-scale effort was made to actually survey language use in Wales was as part of the 1891 census. The language data it produced was by no means perfect, but it gives a fascinating snapshot into the linguistic history of the country. The 1891 census was taken at a time that was highly politicized, and that was already characterized by rapid cultural change through industrialization and migration from the countryside to the towns and cities. But for many people at this time, what the Welsh language represented was the national identity. When it came to the language census, there were calls by Welsh cultural leaders to be patriotic and to not renounce your language. Welsh language leaders and publications encouraged people to fill out the census forms in Welsh, to demand Welsh language forms, and some even encouraged people to declare they spoke Welsh only, even if they were bilingual. I've found some evidence of this last point among my own ancestors in South Wales. Many of them claimed to be monolingual Welsh speakers in 1891. But 10 years later, in the 1901 census, as fully grown adults with little access to language education, many of them suddenly were bilingual. It wasn't just people boosting the numbers of monolingual Welsh speakers that created problems with the data. There is evidence of census enumerators stretching the truth of people's competence in English, recording them as bilingual when they really couldn't utter more than a few words in the English language. There were also instances of Welsh speakers being denied census forms in the Welsh language through both malice on the part of the enumerators and incompetence on the part of the state. One batch of Welsh language forms was sent off to Liverpool instead of the Welsh village it was meant for. All these cases should make us a little bit critical of the final data. But while the census was a bit of a mess, the language data is still invaluable, and in the end, the 1891 census showed that 30.4% of people in Wales spoke Welsh only. 24.1% spoke Welsh and English, and 45.5% spoke only English. Reactions to this data differed. Some cultural leaders reacted positively to over half the population being Welsh speakers. Others interpreted it as a decline, which placed the language and the nation at a historical crossroads. And what this data means for Welsh history research is that many of the records that we encounter will be written in Welsh. The records that are sometimes in Welsh include the 1911 and 1921 census, tombstones, a lot of the records specifically connected to Welsh religious nonconformists, which includes most of the population, and newspapers, journals, and books like parish histories. So those are some really important records, ones that I really can't imagine doing research without. And thankfully, these are also among the many records that are online. There's one caveat to all of this. There is one type of Welsh word that you'll encounter no matter what kind of historical record you're looking at. And those words are place names. The vast majority of Welsh places are, unsurprisingly, in Welsh. And place names are important because they show up in almost all of the records, and paying attention to them is critically important to your ability to track the people you're researching or find your ancestors, especially the ones with common names. The best way to identify place names is by looking for proper nouns that are capitalized, and then just Googling them to see what comes up. Or you can pay attention to the many times you'll see people referred to as so-and-so of somewhere. With some practice, you'll be able to intuitively know what's a place name just by looking at the sentence, no matter if you're looking at a Welsh sentence or an English sentence. But that will take some time. When it comes to using place names to research your family history, the most important ones to pay attention to are the names of parishes, towns and villages, and farms or addresses. In this case, we have Pantmeddyg, near the village of Llanwenog, in the parish of Llanwenog. And these are some of the place names you're usually going to be including in your search terms. People were often known by where they lived, especially when it comes to rural farmers and people who owned or rented houses. They were never just Margaret Thomas. They were Margaret Thomas of some place. For laborers, it's a little bit different, but they may be named in relation to the farm they worked at, and if not that, they will be mentioned alongside the parish where they live. So it's important that you get used to looking for and searching with place names. So always keep an eye out for them. But how do you proceed when you do encounter Welsh language sources in your research? I've actually created a document with some of the essential terms that I use on a regular basis when researching my Welsh ancestors. So if you look in the video description, there's actually a link to the free resources section on my website where you can download it. I don't want to go into too many specifics about the Welsh language here, but there is one thing about Welsh grammar that I do want to point out. Welsh has a lot of grammatical mutations, which means that the spelling of some words changes depending on the words around it. It's kind of similar to the difference in English between a cat and an owl. So the word a changes its spelling when it comes before a vowel. This is much more common in Welsh, and oftentimes it's actually the spelling of the noun that changes. So an example in Welsh is a brother, which is brawd, but his brother is a frawd. It can also happen with place names too. So when you enter Wales from England, you might see a sign saying, "Welcome to Wales, Croeso i Gymru," where Cymru has undergone a mutation. It'll take some practice being able to recognize certain words when they have different spellings, but you'll get used to it soon enough. So now I'm going to show you that with knowing just a couple words, you can actually do a really good job of interpreting biographical information that you find in Welsh language articles. Here's our example. It's the obituary of Sarah Davis of Ridgway, Wisconsin. If you're one of her descendants, you're probably an English speaker in the US, but her obituary is in Welsh. So what words do we need to know to be able to interpret it? We need to know a couple words related to family and important places, a couple related to time and major life events, and then a couple prepositions. And if you want to take a minute to pause and look through the word list, you can do that. So these are some of the words that appear in the booklet on my website. But with just these 10 words, plus also paying attention to the proper nouns, we can almost read the entire obituary. The first sentence is almost fully readable. Davis, September 4th, 1877, in Ridgway, Wisconsin, Miss Sarah Davis, spouse Mr. Henry Davis, 46 years old. The second sentence, we get some place information. From Gwerncolly, parish Llanddewi Brefi, Aberteifi. Third, we get some migration information. Family to America, from Llandirmwyn, Gaerfyrddin. And fourth sentence, we get some burial information. Buried, chapel, Bedyddwyr in Ridgway. And then the last sentence, we can't really read at all. But that's more than enough information to continue your research and continue finding your ancestors. In fact, having the specific farm and parish she was born at is actually the most crucial part of finding your immigrant ancestors back to Wales. So I hope this video encourages you to research your Welsh ancestors. The Welsh language is nothing to be scared of, but if you approach it dismissively or with fear, it will prevent you from finding your ancestors. Now go download the Welsh vocabulary booklet from my website and let me know if you make any discoveries. And also let me know in the comments if there are any Welsh words that you think people will find helpful while looking for their ancestors. Special thanks to YouTube members Wiggle Wiggle and Alan Griffith. If you want to help support my work, consider becoming a YouTube member too. Otherwise, share with your friends and family and on social media. Thanks for watching and have a great day.